You have an idea for a book, and now you're ready to start writing, but you realize you don't even know what perspective you want to write in. Should it be first person or third person? Does it even matter? Will choosing the wrong one ruin the whole thing? And are you allowed to switch perspective? In this video, I'll go over the different types of perspective and help you find out which one is right for you. And I'll also go over if you're allowed to change point of view and how you might want to do that. First person perspective is when you use words like I and me for your character. So, for example, I walk down the stairs, my heart races. I would imagine those are two different scenarios and that your character's not that out of shape. Maybe they are, I'm not here to judge. To give you more of a passage, it could be I stub my toe and trip, and before I have time to react, I hit the ground and scrape my elbow on the pavement. First person is good for making your audience feel like an active part in your story. You keep using words like I and me, therefore they keep saying it over and over again in their head, and they get really into, this is happening to me as a mindset, or at least that's kind of the intention of it. They can also hear the character's thoughts as if they were their own, and that gives a bit more of an intimate connection. The immersion is great. It builds up atmosphere and a connection with the character. And like I already said, it is on the more intimate side. It really puts the reader in the protagonist's head. Third person, on the other hand, uses words like he or she and refers to the characters by name, even if it's the POV character. To use our previous example, it would be Jeff walks down the stairs, his heart races, Jeff stubs his toe and trips, and before he has time to react, hits the ground and scrapes his elbow on the pavement. You can think of it like first person versus third person video games. One is you're seeing through their eyes, the other one is kind of like you're over their shoulder. Third person still lets them imagine themselves as the character and view things from the perspective of the character, but not in as intimate of a capacity. It's just not as hardcore specialized in that facet. When it comes to third person, there are more than two different types, actually. There's a couple different types. The main ones, though, would be third person limited, third person omniscient. Limited, you do have a single POV character. You can jump around into different heads, but more setup for that. You don't hear two different people's thoughts at the same time in third person limited, typically. Whereas you can hear every single character's thoughts without any head hopping or any jumping back and forth with omniscient. To be very clear on the difference between limited and omniscient, limited means you're basically attached to one character at a given time. You are still filtering the things that are seen and heard and felt through this person and thought. You're able to jump around. It just needs a bit of setup. But you are still grounded in a single person. Omniscient is everybody all the time. There are no real secrets. Third person omniscient is the least intimate, but it opens up way more possibilities and a lot more flexibility with what you can show and who you can follow and when and how, and what you can reveal to your audience at a given time. Omniscient can have a very grand and epic feel, but it's not necessarily an obligation if you want to do epic fantasy or a space opera. It's a matter of preference and it's not too big of a deal. Some genres prefer one type of perspective, other genres prefer another. The main thing is that you won't ruin your book by going with whatever you want. What works for me in particular is third person limited. I tend to do a decent amount of POV characters, and I find that if you have a lot of POV characters, that can, if it's in first person, it can be a little bit jarring. So, third person limited, it gives you a slightly more distant perspective, like a bit more of a zoom out slash macro perspective. And I do like that because it accomplishes that while still remaining intimate and connected and letting you feel like the character in a lot of ways and letting you experiencing things through the character themselves. If it comes to changing perspective, as in from first person to third person, I would never do that unless there is a narrative reason for it. There will be opportunities like that which present themselves. You will potentially come across it, or at least a time where it's an option. You don't have to, though. It is high risk, or at least tends to be, and doesn't necessarily present much reward in return for that risk. More times than not, you are safer just sticking to either first person, third person, or one of those variations and not switching it up. Now, like I said, there are situations where that might be the move, but if you're a new writer, I would recommend that you get a little bit more experience before you try something as niche and potentially complex as that. Regardless, with what I recommend though, like I say, there are no rules in art. You can do whatever you want, and if it feels right to you, go ahead, try it. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work out, and you just do a little bit of editing and you switch your perspective back to what it was in the first place. Or maybe you find out the one you switched to you like better, so you edit the first part of your book to be more in line with what you like. It's really all up to you. I wouldn't tell you to hold yourself back or to not explore even the craziest, sort of wackiest aspects of writing, especially because the only way to get experience is to do the thing, and then after you do the thing, you have now become experienced in it. You have to do what you're gonna do either way. The only rule in art is that if you don't create it, it doesn't exist. I say that quite often. No matter who's giving the advice or how much you respect their opinion or how much you think their advice is good and should be followed, really, it's not a hard rule. Do your own thing, set your own trail, and don't let somebody else's advice hold you back or be a shackle. Head hopping or changing your POV character, on the other hand, is completely different. The amount of head hopping you can get away with really depends on this sort of genre, but mostly execution. If you do it and the reader likes it, it's not a problem, no matter how much you do it. I will give you some general genre guidelines just because I know a lot of people get analysis paralysis. They've got all these questions and they're so niche that you can't find your answer online. So, genre wise, stuff like mystery, thriller, horror, those don't tend to jump around in perspective too much. They can, but it's less common. Same with romances. Um, that said, all about execution. If you do it, it's good. All the power to you. It was good. Well done. Sci-fi and fantasy, on the other hand, they have they play a lot more fast and loose with any sort of guidelines. You can hop around as much as you want with reckless abandon, as long as it doesn't suck and as long as it's not confusing. If you have a coherent story at the end and people are liking it and happy with it, and as long as your execution was good, you can head hop in fantasy and sci-fi without even having to worry slightly. Above all else, just make sure that you are not forcing it and that you're not ruining the story with it. The criteria I've given you here is quite subjective, but the problem is that art in general tends to be a very subjective medium. So you can't really get hard answers for a lot of this stuff. A little bit of general advice for changing POV: try to only do it if you're starting out and you're new. Try to only really do it at the beginning of chapters. That helps you get a little bit more structure, a little bit more clarity. You can always give a character unique chapter headers too, and really sort of capture the feel of a specific character. Above all else, I think the strength of only changing POV at a chapter is that it does really help avoid confusion, and it helps establish who you are seeing things through quite quickly. That said, you have to do it as much as the story demands. You are just as beholden to the story as the story is beholden to you. If you do decide to change POVs inside of a chapter instead of at the end of or beginning of a new one, what you're going to do is just leave a bit of extra space between your paragraphs. When you're writing normally, you finish your paragraph, you press enter, and you start up your new paragraph. If you are changing POV, on the other hand, finish your paragraph, press enter twice, boom, boom. Now you start your new character's POV and the paragraph and continue writing like normally, just from that other person's perspective. In the extra big gap you've left where you pressed enter twice, you can line up your cursor with the center instead of to the left and just put 3 stars, like star, star, star. That's a placeholder for now. When it comes time to format your book, which isn't until after it's edited, then you can replace those stars with a flourish if you want, or you can keep the stars. Maybe you can just have it as a blank space. It's really up to you. It's not a huge deal with that. Just make sure that it is clear enough that it is a break. That's why you leave the extra space. You don't want your person to be, like your viewer, to be reading and then they get like 3 paragraphs in and they're like, hold on, when did it turn into this person's perspective? You're going to want to make it abundantly clear. Now, whatever form that break takes doesn't really matter. You know, like I said, could just be space, could be the 3 stars, could be a flourish, or if you have multiple POV characters and frequent POV characters, you can give them each their own unique little scene break icon that you use every time a scene break happens and they become the POV character. That would be used in place of those star, star, stars or flourishes. As with a lot of these things, it's all about preference and it's all about execution. There's no real hard rules. I know I said it a bunch of times even in this video, but no matter how many times I say it, it's still true. No hard rules. As long as it's not noticeably bad, then you're in the clear. And if you do think it's noticeably bad, there's a decent chance that maybe you're just your own biggest hater. You know what I mean? You're going to want an objective perspective to actually see if stuff needs fixed. As you get more experienced, though, you will develop a feel for it. I am digressing here. So that's it for this video. And as always, get in the comment section. Let me know down below what I should cover next.